Today, you'll learn hard surface modeling in Blender from scratch, and for that we are going to give life to BMO, with which we are going to learn a lot of techniques.
I am a little living boy.
These techniques are perfect for creating rigid and mechanical objects, like robots, electronic devices, or machinery. So BMO is the perfect model. It is compact, friendly, and full of useful details to apply the basic concepts, like geometry flow, edge control, Boolean operations, and the use of bevels. And when we finish our model, we are going to add lights and materials for our final render to have this beautiful portfolio piece. The resources of this tutorial, along with the reference images, I'm going to leave them for you to download for free from my Download page. You have the link in the description. And even though this is a step-by-step tutorial for beginners, I recommend that you already know the basic concepts of Blender. You already have several videos on my channel for that. I am the Parabox, and here we explore the 3D universe behind each vertex. Let's go with the tutorial. Alright friends, let's get started with our little robot. We're going to open up Blender. I'm using version 4.4 for this tutorial. And the first thing we need to do is select everything in the scene and delete it. For this tutorial, it's important to activate two add-ons that come built into Blender. So I'll go to Edit, then Preferences, and in the Add-ons tab, I'll search for two specific ones. The first is called Node Wrangler. Make sure to enable it. It helps a lot when working with node connections. The second one is Bool Tool. We'll activate that too, and if it doesn't show up in the list, go to Extensions and install it from there. Once both add-ons are activated, go ahead and close the Preferences window. Now, we're ready to start modeling. But first, we need to import our reference images. I've included the reference images in the downloadable resources. You'll find a little folder with front and side views of BMO. These two views are the ones we'll focus on. So back in Blender, I'm going to press the number 5 to switch to orthographic mode. Then I'll press 1 to go into front view. Now I'll drag in the front reference image and drop it in place. Next, I'll press 3 to switch to the right side view. I'll drag in the side reference now. Then I'll select both images and press Alt-G to reset their positions so they're fully centered. Now that the references are in place, there's something important to keep in mind before modeling. Since we're going to render this model, it's ideal to give it a real-world scale. That way, light calculations will be much more accurate. So we'll start by creating a cube. I'll press N, and in the Transform panel, we can see its size. Right now, this cube is 2 meters tall, which is way too big for BMO. I'm going to scale it down to something more realistic. I'd say around 30 centimeters tall. So I'll shrink the cube to roughly that size. Then I'll select both reference images and scale them down too. Try to match the cube's size approximately. It doesn't need to be exact. This will just help us manage lighting more easily later on. Now I'll move the front reference a bit backward and move the side reference slightly to the left. Cool, we're ready to model. Let's create another cube and scale it so it fits the front reference. Try to match the sides closely. To see through the mesh, I'll press Alt-Z to enable X-ray mode. That's the same as the button up here. Now I'll close the side panel so we can see better. In Edit mode, I'll select the entire cube and use the Move tool to position it right on top of the reference. Try to align the edges as accurately as possible. Now I select everything with A, then press S, X, to scale it on the X-axis and match the width. Cool, so now we've got the size set for the front view. Now let's go to the side view. I'll select the back part of the cube and adjust it to match the reference. Same with the front side, just like that. Alright, now we've got this cube, which will be the main body. Next, we're going to create those bevels on the corners to make it look more rounded. The one way to do this is by switching to Edge Select mode, pressing Ctrl, Alt, and clicking to select all 4 corner edges. And then press Ctrl B, and with the mouse wheel, we can increase the number of segments we want to create. That gives us the cut we're looking for. However, I want us to do it in a more versatile way using the bevel modifier. So I'll go to the Modifiers tab, press Shift A, and look for the bevel modifier. Got it. Now in the front view, I'll increase the width and add some segments. Maybe around 12. I'll fine-tune the width. There we go. But we don't want this bevel on all edges, just the 4 we selected. So again, I press the key N to open the side panel. And here, where it says mean bevel weight, I'm going to set it to 1. Then, in the bevel modifier, where it says limit method, I'll change it to weight. And that way, the modifier only applies to the edges I had selected. Now, I can keep adjusting the bevel from this panel, which gives us a much more flexible workflow. Alright, we've got our first devils done. Now I want to add a second devil, but just a bit smaller because these edges here still feel too sharp. So I'll create another bevel modifier. I'll leave this one set to angle and reduce the width a lot. I just want a tiny bevel, something like this. I'll also increase the segments. Let's go with 4 segments. Maybe make it a bit smaller. Perfect. This way it looks much smoother. Keep in mind that softer shapes tend to feel more friendly. When the edges are too sharp, it can look a bit more aggressive. Alright, we've got our bevels, so now let's make the horizontal cut that goes across the body of the character. I'm going to press Shift A and create a plane. I'll scale it and rotate it 90 degrees in the side view. You can press Ctrl to snap it exactly to 90 degrees. I'll place it here and press Alt-Z to switch to X-ray view. Let's position it right where we want the cut to be. Now we're going to do our first Boolean operation. Select this square, then Shift select BMO's body and go to the other tab. In the Boolean panel, which comes from the Bool tool add-on we activated, we're going to use the difference operation to subtract the square from the main body. Great, the operation was applied, but nothing seems to have changed. That's because the square doesn't have any thickness yet. So I'll press Shift A and add a solidify modifier to it. Now we can see the cut. We want this to be an extremely thin layer, almost invisible, so I'll set the thickness to 0.0001. That gives us the subtle cut we need. Now we want to get back that bevel we created earlier. So I'm going to select BMO's body again, go to the Modifiers tab, and collapse everything to keep it tidy. Then I'll move the Boolean modifier we just added down below the bevel. That way, the bevel is applied after the cut, and we get that nice edge back. Perfect. Now we've got the body with the main cut, and we're going to create the screen. I'll select everything and hide it with H. Then, I'll create a new cube and scale it to match the screen reference. I'll move it upward and slide it forward a bit. Good. I'll scale it on the y-axis using SY and then hide the body to position this new cube where it needs to go, slightly overlapping the front surface. Just like that. We'll use the same bevel workflow as before. Press Ctrl-Alt-Click to select the edge loops, and in the Item tab, increase the bevel weight to 1. Add a new bevel modifier and set its limit method to weight. Reduce the width. Increase the segments. Let's go with 12 again. And check the positioning. I think both the size and position look good. Alright, looks pretty good. Once you're happy with that, double check the depth. That looks fine too. Now I'll select the screen cube, then Shift select the body, and again go to Edit and apply a difference operation. That removes the entire front section where the screen goes. So that's how we use Boolean operations. Mainly to subtract parts of an object's volume, using another object. Next, we're going to create the two little slots we see here. The process is exactly the same. I'll create a new cube, scale it down, press Alt-Z, and adjust it to the size of the reference. I'll move it over here and tweak the dimensions. This time, I'll do the bevel manually. I'll press Ctrl-Alt to select this edge, then Ctrl-B, and use the mouse wheel to adjust the number of segments. We don't need too many here. Something like this is fine. I'll push it forward a bit to get the correct position. The cut should have about this depth. I'll select these back edges and move them backward. Okay, now let's do the cut. Select this piece, then Shift select the body, and hit Difference again. So far, we've only used the difference operation, which is honestly the only one we need for this model. Alright, now for the cylinder, same idea. I'll create a cylinder. It shows up with 32 vertices by default, which is fine. I'll scale it down, rotate it in the side view, and match it to the size of the reference. Somewhere around here. I'll slide it over, maybe scale it up just a bit since this button seems a little larger. Something like that. It only needs to overlap the surface slightly. Right about here. Now I'll Shift select the body and hit Difference again. Great. Now we've got those main cutouts. Next up are the buttons. For the buttons, I think we can duplicate the reference image. I'll press Shift-D, and in side view, I'll rotate it 90 degrees so it faces up. Then, in top view, that's numpad 7, I'll start creating each of the objects. I'll click on the surface, add a plane, and scale it to match the size of this cross shape. That gives us our first shape. Now I'll go into edit mode, select everything, and press W, subdivide. In the number of cuts, I'll set it to 2. That way, the plane is divided into 9 sections. Then, switching to vertex select, I'll select all the corner vertices and delete them. That leaves us with the cross shape. Great. Now let's create the circular buttons. I'll add a circle here. It shows up way too big. So I'll scale it down and adjust it to the reference size. Or something like this. I'll go into edit mode, select all, and press F to fill it. Then, I'll duplicate it with Shift-D and scale it to match the smaller round button. Done. For the triangle, I think we can duplicate the cross and just delete the unnecessary vertices. Then, we can manually adjust the rest. I'll scale the bottom part, then select these 2 vertices, press M, merge at center, and move them along the y-axis to create the rough shape of the triangle. Perfect. We still need the 2 little buttons below. I'll duplicate the cross again, delete more vertices, and shape this small form. Alright, I'll press Shift-D and then X to move it along the x-axis and create the second copy. Now we've got all the button shapes ready. I'll delete the extra reference image I created, just select it and delete. Now I'll select all the buttons, rotate them 90 degrees using Ctrl for snapping, and place them on the character. Make sure they are sitting properly on the surface, nice and flush. I'll enable X-ray view again so I can position them more accurately. Good. Now we'll add the solidify modifier to give them thickness. But before that, I'll press Ctrl-A and apply the scale since we've changed the scale in different ways and we want the objects to be uniform. Now I'll go to the modifiers, press Shift A and add Solidify. That's what we get. In my offset setting, I'll set it to 0. Then I'll press Ctrl L and choose Copy Modifiers, so all the selected buttons get the same modifier. The next step is to smooth out these buttons so they look nice and round. Since we've got several different shapes, we'll take this chance to try different techniques for each one. We'll start by subdividing them. This smooths them out. And to preserve their shape, we'll control the edges. First, I add a subdivision surface modifier. I'll sub the subdivision level to 2 and then press Ctrl L to copy the modifiers. Now you can see what happens. The models are getting subdivided, but some are losing their shape, while others look decent. So let's start refining them. Let's begin with the round buttons. For these, I'll simply add a bevel modifier and place it after the subdivision. I'll reduce the width while holding Shift for more control and aim for a small value, maybe 0.001. Okay, I'll set the segments to 2. Now it already looks much better. But in the center, it still feels a bit too irregular. So I'll go into Edit mode and press I to do an inset, pushing it toward the center. Then I do another inset with the I key, this time pushing inward again. That creates additional edge loops to support the geometry. I can also add one more segment to the bevel, and I'll slightly lower the width. Let's say 0.0008. Okay, now I'll select this other round button, then Shift select the one that already has the modifier, press Ctrl L, and choose Copy Modifiers to make them identical. I'll repeat the same inset steps for this one too. Alright, next step is the triangular button. This one is much simpler. I'll add another subdivision surface modifier. I'll press Shift D over the first one to duplicate it. Then, in the first modifier, I'll change the subdivision type to simple. That way, the first one doesn't smooth the shape, and we retain the original form much better. I'll add another level of subdivision to the second modifier. And done. For the cross, I can repeat this same process. Shift, select the triangle, press Ctrl L, and copy the modifiers. That one looks really good. Now for this last button, I'll give it 2 more levels of subdivision. Let's say 4 and 4. I'll add some support loops too. I'll press Ctrl R, then the number 2, and release. That gives us a cleaner, more square shape. I'll do the same on the other side. Okay, now I want to apply the Solidify modifier to the shape. Then I'll press Ctrl R and add a loop cut right at the front to manually control those contours. I'll also add one in the back to even it out. Done. Looks nice. I think the only thing we should tweak is the bevel width here. It looks too different from the others. So I'll go to the bevel modifier and set the width to 0.0012. This same thing here, 0.0012. That makes it a bit rounder. Remember, rounder shapes usually feel friendlier. On the other hand, for the cross shape, I think I'll add one more level of subdivision to that one. It was looking a bit underdefined. Alright, that's where we're at so far. All the buttons are done. I'll select them all in side view and move them slightly backward. They were sticking out too much. Okay, looks better now. Let's improve the visual feedback of our model. I'll go up to the viewport shading settings and enable cavity. That helps highlight all the little details. I'll also turn on shadows to check how everything looks under lighting. That makes the volumes easier to read. However, the shadow setting can slow down the viewport a bit during modeling. So to keep things running smoothly, I'm going to turn it back off. Cool. Let's keep going. The next thing we're going to work on is the little speaker holes. Let's start on that. I'll press Shift S. Now I'm going to place the 3D cursor back at the world origin. And what we're going to do is create a circle. I'll create a circle here. In the panel, I'll set it to have only 6 vertices, and I'll set the fill type to triangles. So in edit mode, this is what it gives us. I'll isolate this object for a moment. Now I'll select everything in edit mode, press W, and choose subdivide. I'll scale it up a bit and select all the tip vertices. I'll hold Shift to select all the outer points, then select the center one. In the side view, I'll press Shift D to duplicate and Z to move it on the Z axis. That way, I'm creating a copy of those points. I'll delete the base, and now I've got these 7 vertices positioned exactly like the 7 holes we see in the side reference. I'll move them over here and scale them a little. Then I'll press Ctrl A to apply the scale. Okay, back in edit mode. I'll select them all and press Z to scale them along the Z axis. That gives us stick-like shapes. Now, to give them thickness, I'm going to convert them into curves. I press W and choose Convert to Curve. In the curve settings, under Geometry, I'll add some depth. Just a little to make them thicker. I'll also increase the resolution. I think 8 will be enough. Let's enable Fill too. Done. Now let's position them correctly. I'll rotate them and place them in the side view where the reference says they should be. I'll align them here and scale them. Something like this. You can tweak the depth if needed. In my case, it actually looks pretty good right away. I'll also make them push in a bit deeper, about this much. Now we're going to do another Boolean operation. Hold Shift and select the body. Then go to the Boolean tools and choose Difference. And now we've got those little speaker holes. Next, we need to add a mirror modifier so we get them on the other side too. So let's go to the Modifiers tab and find the Mirror modifier. Use the eyedropper to select BMO's body as the mirror object. And now they're mirrored on the other side too. Great, I'll lower them a bit. I want them slightly lower than the original reference. Something like this. Perfect. The next step is the little letters. So for those, I'll press Shift A and create a text object. In the text, I'll type in uppercase BMO. I'll scale it down and try to place it on the side panel. But this font doesn't look anything like the one used on the original character. So I'll go to the Text Settings panel, and here we have the option to choose a different font. This opens up all the fonts installed on Windows. You can browse and find one you like, or use the same one I'm including with the tutorial resources. I've got it saved here. It's called Happy Lucky Regular. I select it and hit Open. Now we've got a font that looks much closer to the original reference. I'll rotate it 90 degrees, position it roughly where it should go, and scale it a little along the y-axis. Just like that. Try to match it up as best as possible. As you'll see, it's not going to fit perfectly. So to make it fit better, we'll first convert it into a mesh. I press W and select Convert to Mesh. Now we can go into Edit mode and tweak it manually. I'll start by selecting the M. I'll scale it along the Z axis and move it a bit. The B also needs some scaling on Z. These cuts I'll scale them manually to match the reference better. It's never going to be 100% perfect. Just try to get as close as possible without being overly picky. For the O, I'll adjust the scale in Z and make the inner ellipse much smaller. That gives us the shape we want. I'll move it right up to the edge so it fits nicely. Now we'll add the solidify modifier. I'll set the offset to 0 and apply the scale with Ctrl A. Then I'll fine-tune the thickness. I think it's a bit too thin, so I'll set it to 0.002. Cool. Now we have the side letters. Let's duplicate the mesh and move it along the x-axis to place it on the other side. I'll rotate it by pressing R, Z, 180. Then in side view, I'll adjust the position so it lines up with the other side. Place it carefully on the surface. Okay, let's move on to the back. For the back part, I'll hide the references. This section has a few horizontal slots and also the battery door. If you want, you can drag the reference image into view, but I'm going to work from memory since it's not too complicated. I'll grab this piece here. In the side view, I'll duplicate it with Shift D and move it backward. Then I'll Shift select the body and use the difference operation. Done. That gives us this slot. Now what I want to do is add an array modifier to duplicate it. I'll set the X factor to 0 and increase the distance on Z. Let's make 5 copies. In edit mode, I'll adjust the length. They're too long. I'll rotate the whole thing 90 degrees and place it here on the back. I'll scale it down just a bit, and also give them a little more space on the Z-axis. We position them a bit better. Alright, they're a little too deep, so I'll pull them out. And I think they're too thick. Maybe I should have imported the reference after all, but we're almost done with this part. Alright guys, let's leave it like this. Now for the battery cover, I'll create a plane. I'll scale it and rotate it 90 degrees on the x-axis. Let's scale it to roughly match the size of the battery section. Now, in edit mode, I'll select everything and press X, then choose only faces to delete just the face. Now I'll select this and press E to extrude, and then Y. That moves it inward on the Y-axis just a bit. Now it's bevel the corners. Switch to Edge Select, press Ctrl-Alt to select all 4 edges, and then press Ctrl-B to bevel. Adjust the width. Something like this looks good. Now, I'll add the solidify modifier and adjust the thickness. I want it to be really thin, maybe 0.001, just a small amount. If the solidify looks weird, like part of it is extruding one way and another part the opposite way, what you need to do is select everything and press Shift-N to recalculate normals. That recalculates everything. Though honestly, in my case, it didn't make a big difference. Now we're going to subtract it. Select the piece, then Shift-select the body, and hit difference. Done. That gives us the little battery slug. You can be more precise with the placement if you like. But with that, the body section is complete. All the parts of the main body are finished. Now, let's move on to the arms and legs. For the arms, what we'll do is click in this area and create any object. A cube works fine. I'll go into edit mode, switch to vertex select, and press M, that's center, to collapse all vertices into one. From here, I'll extrude that single vertex to create the arm silhouette. Once that's ready, I'll add the skin modifier. What skin does is generate geometry from the vertices. Right now it looks strange because the default thickness is way too big. So I'll select everything, press Ctrl A, and scale down the thickness. Great. The shape still looks too blocky, so I'll have a subdivision surface modifier. Make sure to move it to the top of the stack. That increases the resolution. Then I'll allow the second subdivision surface modifier to smooth it out completely. As you can see, part of it still looks a bit off. That's because the skin modifier uses the root vertex to define orientation. In this case, it's using the second vertex. So I'll select the first one and click Mark Root. That fixes the issue. Perfect. Now we can fine-tune the shape. I'll adjust this area manually. I'll also set the subdivision level to 2 here at the bottom. And in the skin modifier, I'll enable smooth shading to make everything look nice and smooth. For the fingers, I'll create a UV sphere. I'll scale it down a lot and place it over here. I'll move the top part upward and scale the bottom along the Z-axis to make it more pointed. That's all we need. Just this one piece is the finger. So now I'll align it with the reference. Actually, the entire arm should be a bit more forward, and I think it also needs to be a bit thicker. I'll press Ctrl A to increase the thickness. Then I'll carefully position the fingers. I'll duplicate and place each one with care. I think I'll still make the arm a bit thicker using Ctrl A. Then I'll finish positioning the fingers. Okay. For this arm, I think we can remove one level of subdivision from the first modifier. That way, the shape becomes smoother and a bit pointier. Otherwise, it feels too flat in this area. That already looks better. Let's improve the finger positions now. I'll scale down the arm by selecting all those vertices and pressing Ctrl A. But this time, I'll press Y to scale only along the Y-axis. Just slightly. Good. Now, let's add the mirror modifier. Add the mirror. Collapse everything, and set the mirror object to be BMO's body. I'll also join the fingers into one object using Ctrl J. Then, in edit mode, I'll select everything and press Alt S to make them thicker. Do the same thing. Add a mirror modifier and set the mirror object to be BMO's body. Now we've got the legs left to do. For that, I'll start by creating a cube. I'll scale it down and position it around here, where the leg starts. I'll match it up to where the reference shows. Now, I'll create a new loop cut with Ctrl R. Switch to Face Select and extrude to form the foot. Let's add the subdivision surface modified. There we go. Now we need to add some support loops to keep the shape from deforming too much. I'll move everything up a little. Add a support loop here and scale it slightly. I'll place another support loop at the bottom. Then we'll make a few more tweaks. I'll add another support loop here and scale it a bit to give it a more dynamic shape. I'll also nudge this section slightly outward. Alright. Now I'll select everything and rotate it on the Z axis. Press R, Z, and rotate it a bit. I'll scale the bottom part just a little more. And there we go. We've got the foot. I'll add a few more subdivisions to smooth it out and also apply the mirror modifier. I'll set the mirror object to be BMO's body. Now the only things left are the screen and the face. I'll select everything and hide it, so only the back reference stays visible. Let's start with the face. I'll create a plane, scale it, and rotate it 90 degrees. I'll make it slightly larger than the screen cutout. Move it up a little. Done. With the eyes, we'll just create a circle. Set the fill type to end gun and use around 16 vertices. Scale it, rotate it 90 degrees, and position it over the reference. Scale it on the x-axis. Then I'll press the I key to inset and create some support loops. For the mouth, we can duplicate one of the edge loops with Shift-D. Scale it and begin extruding to form the smile. Done. I'll bring it up to here. Let's have the mirror modifier now. Using the eyedropper, I'll set the mirror axis to the background plane we placed earlier. Then, in Edit mode, I'll move everything toward the center. To make the pieces merge, I'll enable clipping. Move things here, adjust the vertex positions. Alright, now we need to add the solidify modifier so it has some thickness. I'll set the offset to 0, slightly increase the thickness, and then add the subdivision surface modifier. I'll set it to 3 subdivisions. At this point, I feel like the solidify is a bit too thick, so I'll reduce it a bit. Done. Okay, I'll select both of these face pieces and move them forward. Then I'll press Alt-H to unhide everything. Now I'll take the face and move it backward so it slightly overlaps the screen cutout. Around here. I'll push it a little deeper. This part is up to your taste. I like it around this depth. And with that, my friends, our BMO model is finished. There are still a couple of things we can improve. For example, these edges still look a bit sharp. So I'll select everything with A, press W, then choose Shade Smooth. That softens all the edges. If you want, we can also tweak the bevel. The bevel here has 12 segments. You can experiment to see if it looks better with more. The same for the one below, and maybe increase the segments a bit. I think 6 is a good number. Let's make it a nice round value, 0.025. Now, we still have some very sharp corners, like these here. We're going to add a bevel modifier to them too, but I don't want to do that just yet. We'll wait until we start rendering. There's an important concept I want to show you with that. So with this, our model is done. Let's move on to the rendering and materials stage. First of all, I like to reorganize my interface before starting this part. So I'll start by deleting the timeline. I'll also tweak the position of the shortcuts a bit. On the left side, I'll open 2 more panels. In one, I'll have the camera view, which will be placed at the top. And in the other, I like to open the shader editor. So I activate the shader editor, and this layout is what I personally enjoy working with the most. Alright, let's add a camera. Press Shift A and add a camera. I'll position it diagonally, pointing slightly toward our character. I might scale it a bit. Then, in this 3D view, I'll press the 0 key to switch to camera view. I also like to turn off the gizmo, disable overlays, and close both the T and N side panels. That way, the view is completely clean. From here, we can adjust the position of the character inside the frame. You can do this by moving the camera or directly in this view. In the View menu, I'll enable this option called Camera to View. When it's active, any changes I make in the viewport will also move the camera. That makes adjusting the composition a lot easier. Something else I want to change right now is the camera lens because I feel like there's too much perspective. So I'll go into the camera properties and increase the focal length. I'll set it to 75. What this does is reduce the perspective distortion. The lower the number, the more distortion you'll get. So in this case, using 75 softens the perspective a bit. Alright, now let's find an angle that we like. I think something around here should work. When we're happy with the angle, we can disable camera to view and zoom in again if we want. Okay, the next step is to start setting up the lighting. First of all, I'm going to create a plane. A plane that I'll place right under BMO's feet. So the character has a surface to stand on. That way, the render makes more sense and looks better. Now we want this plane to cover the whole background. So in edit mode, I'll select a back edge and press E, Z to extrude it upward. As you can see, this creates a visible corner. So in top view, I'll align everything with the camera. I'll select everything, rotate it a bit, and adjust the position to make sure it's aligned with the camera view. That way, it fills the entire background. One last step. I'll select the back edge and press Ctrl B to create a bevel. With the mouse wheel, I'll increase the number of segments. Something like this looks good. It makes the background much smoother. Finally, in object mode, I'll press W and select Shade Smooth, and just like that, everything looks 100% smooth. Now let's take a look at how the model looks with the lighting applied. Now I'm going to switch to rendered view. When we enable rendered view, we can see how all the lights are affecting the model. If you want, you can go into the render settings and turn on denoise. That'll make things look better, but it may slow things down a bit. It's totally up to you. The final render will include denoise anyway, so this step is optional. Now, we can already see the model a little bit. That means there's some lighting in the scene. That lighting is coming from the world settings. Here, we've got this node controlling the background. It's currently set to a flat gray that lights the whole environment. I could adjust the color and intensity here if I wanted. But what we want to do is manually place our own lights. So I'll press Shift A and start by creating an area light. Let's rotate it and point it directly at our character. Just like that. I also like to go into the light settings and change the shape from square to disc. I find that works better for soft, friendly-looking characters like this one. We can also tweak the size and intensity of the light. The default settings are actually pretty decent. So this is our first light. A key part of lighting is to highlight the important features of our model. We want to use the play of light and shadow to read the volumes clearly. So we need to position our lights in a way that helps emphasize those shapes. For example, we can see this side of the model is looking a bit dark. It would be a good idea to add a second light over here. I'll select the existing light, press Shift D to duplicate, and rotate it so it hits the model from the side. Something like this. I'll also make the background much larger. Scale it up a lot. And keep adjusting the lighting. Alright, you can see how this makes the right side pop a lot more. Now I want to highlight the opposite side a bit, so I'll duplicate this light again and position it from this angle. Something like this. Now, we can start adjusting the intensity and color of these lights. For example, I'll increase the brightness of the main light. We want this one to really stand out. I'll set it to around 15. For this side light, I'll give it a slightly cooler tone. Something like this. And for the light on the other side, we'll use a warmer color. There we go, something like that. That gives us an interesting color contrast. There's one more thing that can help us, and that's in the render settings. Scroll down to color management. There's a setting here that helps give our renders a bit more clarity. By default, Blender settings can make colors look a bit pale or washed out. So I recommend going here to the look setting and switching it to medium high contrast. That'll make the colors and contrast pop a bit more, because by default, Blender's settings are a little dull. Now that we're here, let's check something else that's also important. In the Overlays menu, there's an option called Face Orientation. As you can see, it immediately highlights this object. What that option does is check the orientation of the normals. So any object with inverted normals will be shown in red. In this case, the object with the flipped normals is this one right here. So I'll go into Edit mode, select everything, and press Shift-N. That recalculates the normals, and now everything is facing the right direction. Doing this now helps ensure everything looks correct when we render. We've got the same issue on the back. I'll select this and press Shift-In again. Now, all the normals are oriented correctly. This one here doesn't matter. That's its natural orientation. Alright, I'll go ahead and turn that off. It's a good idea to check normals every now and then. Now let's start adding materials. I'll go back to object mode. I also recommend having a reference image on hand. In my case, I'm using this little image with a program called PureRef. It helps manage references, it's completely free, and I highly recommend it. I'll use it to choose the appropriate colors. The way we do this is by selecting the object, clicking New Material, and then picking a color. Try to match it as closely as possible to the reference. We've got color, metallic, and roughness controls. I'll slightly increase the metallic. Roughness determines how shiny or matte the surface is. In this case, I'll leave it pretty much as it is. We'll use these values to tweak each of the materials. I recommend not touching metallic too much. I think it works well for the main body, but for the rest, use zero metallic, since they're basically all plastic materials. So I'll go through them one by one, adding new materials for each color. Alright, with that done, we've got the general materials applied. But there are still a few things we can improve. I'll press Ctrl B and select the whole camera frame to render just what's inside. Let's see what we can tweak. First, let's make the screen an emissive material, something that emits light. In the Emission tab, I'll copy the same color using Ctrl C and paste it with Ctrl V. Then I'll increase the strength, maybe to 1.5. Now it's glowing. Another thing we can do is give this little slot a bit more contrast by giving it a different material. So let's go into BMO's body and find the Boolean that created that operation. I'll select BMO's body and go to the Modifiers tab. We're looking for that specific Boolean. This one's the screen, and this one here is the slot we want. I'll expand it and check exact. Then in Solver Options, under Materials, I'll set it to Transfer. That way, the material from this piece gets transferred to the Boolean cut. I'll select the slat piece and assign it the same material we used for the letters. I'll press Shift, select the letters, and hit Ctrl L, then link materials. Now it's much darker and gives a better contrast. Alright, let's do the same for this little button. It looks like a tiny LED light to me. I'll create a new material and make it violet like in the reference. Then I'll repeat the process. Select this piece, this should be the Boolean. Check exact, go to Solver Options and choose Transfer Material. Now the violet color is applied. Let's tweak it a bit. Since this is an emissive material, I'll increase the emission value and choose a color. Something around here. I'll lower the strength, maybe set it to 0.6, and make it slightly smaller. Perfect. Now I want to show you the detail I mentioned earlier about these edges. As you can see, these edges have a very harsh contrast. It creates a visible gap that looks quite unreal. What we're going to do is add one final bevel to BMO's body to highlight all these small edges and show you the difference it makes. So I'll press Shift A and add a bevel modifier. In the geometry settings, I'll turn off clamp overlap. I disable that because it limits the bevel effect in areas where the vertices overlap. Since there are lots of small overlapping parts, we want full control. Now I'll gradually reduce the width until I find a value that works. Something around here looks good. This bevel is working nicely, and now I'll increase the number of segments. I think we can set it to 4 segments. And now you'll notice that some little edges really catch the light. But we're also getting a few artifacts on the surface, as you can see. To fix that, we go into the Shading panel and enable Hardened Normals. That makes all the normals touching these bevels perfectly flat again. Done. Now we've got this tiny bevel that helps emphasize the volumes. We just have a few final tweaks left. For example, adjusting the lighting a bit and giving BMO a more dynamic pose. Let's make the arm wave. First, I'll duplicate this light. With Shift D, I'll move it backward so it lights up the background a bit. And just by doing that, duplicating the light and brightening the background, the render already looks way better. Alright, now let's work on the arm. I'll apply the mirror modifier and select the whole arm in edit mode. Then, I press P and choose Separate Selection. Now I'll do the same for the fingers. I apply the mirror modifier, select everything, enter X-ray mode, press P and Separate Selection. In edit mode, I'll rotate the entire arm and place it in the waving position, visible from the 3D view. As you can see, if I only rotate it like this, it stays hidden behind the render frame. So I'll move it a bit like this. Okay, now I'll grab the fingers and position them properly. I'll speed up this part a bit. It's a bit repetitive. I'm just placing the fingers so they look natural and sit in the right position. Done. It looks like this now. From here, it's just minor tweaks. I'll adjust the lighting a little so the right side glows more. I'll also tweak the arm a bit more and keep adjusting the cameras. Alright, I think I've made all the adjustments I wanted. I think everything looks perfect now in terms of materials, lighting, and composition. So let's move on to the final step, a bit of post-processing to improve the final render. I'll go to the Compositor tab, enable Use Nodes, and increase the size of this workspace. From here, we'll add some nodes to enhance the final result. To see the output, I'll go to this tab and activate the compositor for the camera. I'll also move this light just a little. Alright, first, I'll press Shift+A and add the node Brightness and Contrast. I'll connect it here because I want a bit more contrast. You can adjust it with this slider. How much? That's up to you. I'll leave it at 3. The difference is subtle, but I think it helps a lot. That's our first node. Next, I'll add a node for hue, saturation, value. With this one, you can tweak the hue, saturation, and brightness of your colors. I'll increase the saturation just a little, very subtle, and I'll bump up the brightness slightly too. When we do this, I feel like the background might be a bit too intense. So I'll go back to the shader editor, select the background color, and make it a little more desaturated and a touch redder. Like this. Then I return to the compositor, move things around a bit, and finally add a node called Glare. This node is a camera effect that enhances highlights and glowing areas, like you can see here. I want to keep it very subtle. I'll set it to fog glow mode and reduce the size a bit. That gives us this final touch. And I think with this, we've got our finished result. Now I'll press Ctrl-Shift-Click on the Glare node, and to make our final render, we just press F12. It's rendering now, but it's doing way too many samples. We don't need that many, there are a lot showing up right now. So let's go to the Render tab, under Render Settings, and I'll lower the samples. Maybe just 100. Somewhere between 50 and 100 is more than enough, especially since this model doesn't have any complex materials. Then we press F12 again. It processes the render, and there we have the final result. I think I'll lower the contrast a little. I'll set it to 2 because it was a bit too strong before. And with that, we've completed this hard surface modeling tutorial in Blender. And with this, my friends, we've reached the end of the tutorial. Let me know in the comments if you make it to the end. And if you enjoyed the process, remember, I also have several Blender courses on my Gumroad page. You'll find the link below. And since you made it all the way to the end, I'm giving you a coupon with 20% discount for any of my courses, which are already super affordable. And now, if you want to take your texturing skills to the next level, I'll leave you with this other video right here. I'm sure you're going to love it.